And now for the business of the day. Without further ado, I call to the podium Chair of the Day, President-elect Chris Sideropoulos, to introduce our guest speaker. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Mark Melvin. Mr. Melvin was appointed to the role of Chief Executive Officer for the Committee of Melbourne in May 2022. Mark has a broad and international background, having worked in 7 industries across 2 continents. With 30 years experience in executive roles across Australia, Europe, Mark has a background in retail banking, franchising, oil and gas, and retail. Having made Melbourne his home in 2003, Mark is a proud Melburnian and an enthusiast Collingwood fan. My son will be very pleased, Mark. Well done. So we look forward to receiving Mark's thoughts on Melbourne and how it will be much bigger and brighter in the coming months. Mark, please, the floor is yours.
I thank you very much for that very warm welcome. Immediately, I'm looking for subtitles to come up because, you know, when my accent can be a little bit hard to understand sometimes. So you'll just have to bear with me. Joe will I'm sure, just translate everything for us in the way that she's been able to do it. So thank you very, very much for your very warm welcome and for being so kind to Laura and I and welcoming us to your event. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and thank them for looking after the country and the land on which we eat, sleep, live, breathe, and play. We pay respects to their elders past and present and their emerging leaders. So again, thank you. Now, you're all very clever people. You'll have worked out that this is an Irish accent. If you're from Ireland, it's very important to recognise that it's a Northern Ireland accent. So I don't want anybody going, you're Canadian. I definitely don't need anybody reminding me that I'm Scottish, because I'm not. And with all due respect to my Scottish friends and colleagues, Laura actually, before she got married, was also called Melvin, which was a huge surprise to me when I, first interacted with the Committee for Melbourne. Well, there's another Melvin there. So Laura is also a Melvin. And I remind her of that when we occasionally have a glass of wine and she goes for the water. You're a Melvin, you got to remember these kind of things. Now, if I get this right, I joined the Committee for Melbourne, I'm going to say 2 months ago, at the end of May, 2 months ago. And I came from banking, as you heard. I arrived in Australia 2003, grand final day 2003. And I was telling the guys the story at the table. I came to work for NZ. On NZ, I arrived in 100 Queen Street on the Monday. I'd missed the grand final because I'd fallen asleep through jet lag and the whole way through it, and wondered really what the whole thing was about. And it was a dull grey day, and people were saying, "Welcome to Melbourne. It's always like that." So I arrived in Queen Street, and they decided they'd take me out to show me some branches. And they decided they'd take me to Collingwood, and then they would take me up to Broadmeadows. So you're taking me, like, I know what you're doing. You're taking me somewhere where you think it might be a bit hairy for me. Broadmeadows. I'm from Belfast. Broadie's an upgrade for a boy from Belfast like me. And in there, the branch manager, a gentleman called John Bubis. John Bubis came to me and he said, "Welcome to Australia. You will need this." And he gave me a parcel. And I unraveled the parcel, and inside was my Collingwood scarf and beanie. So I had to be Collingwood from that day. And I pay respect to all Melbourne supporters in the room, because I imagine there's a few of you. But always Collingwood. And I had the great fortune for a few years to live next door to Shane Wakelin when he was playing for Collingwood. He's far too big to argue with. So Collingwood it is for me. And half the room usually go, "Yay," and the other half go, "Oh, seriously, come on." I thought I would tell you a little bit about the Committee for Melbourne. We're not as old as you. You 101 years, I think it is now for Rotary here. The Committee for Melbourne are actually 38 years. Now if I go forward, is that working for me, Joe? Am I pointing at the right thing? There we go. All right. So I'm originally from Belfast, as I say. I arrived here 2003, but I've always been Melbourne. I once was offered the opportunity to go and live in Sydney and work for NZ up in Sydney, and I thought I'd done something wrong. So with all due respect to Sydney-siders and stuff, this is God's country. This is where we live. This is our city. Look at it, how beautiful and how amazing our city is. Like this is it. We can't beat Melbourne. So it's always been Melbourne for me. I worked in my career in Australian banking for three of the big four banks. I've never worked for CBA. But I started at NZ, went to NAB, and then I ended up with Westpac. And laterally, I was the chief executive for the Bank of Melbourne. And you can't help but have a passion for the city that you live and work in. Committee for Melbourne, let me tell you a little bit about that. It is apolitical. We don't get government funding. We're a not-for-profit. We're also a not-for-loss organisation, but we're a not-for-profit member-based organisation. We're founded in the 1980s by 5 CEOs who were passionate Melbourne business leaders who could see that the city was stumbling a little bit, that the economy wasn't as strong as it could and should be, that there was an opportunity to help cement Melbourne as an international city, not just an Australian city, but an international city as well, and a city of significance. It is, just like you, the first of its kind worldwide. There are committees for everywhere. There's a committee for Belfast. I was back in Belfast at the start of May, visiting my mum, and there is a committee for Belfast as well. So there's committees everywhere. In fact, there are, I think, 19 committees for just in Victoria. There are 38 in Australia. And we would be, I would say we're probably the largest one, a little bit larger than our Sydney colleagues. First of its kind worldwide, just like you. And we bring together 150 organizations. Now, they're made up of business, all of the universities, and we have 30 not-for-profit members like Big Issue, Royal Flying Doctor Service. We're all proud members of the committee, and we're proud to have them as our members. The kind of things we've got involved with in the past, and you might love us for some of them and not love us for other ones, but we were originally around when Docklands was developed, Fisherman's Bend development. We advocated for the free tram zone. So I wonder how many of you travelled on a tram today? A few. And hopefully it was free because the Committee for Melbourne advocated for free tram zone. It's something that the tram network is the biggest in the country, biggest in the world. So and to have a free element of it, we're all emotionally attached to it. Not so much as Yarra Trams. Yarra Trams are not emotionally attached to the free tram zone as much as we are, but they've got very good reasons for it. Our aim is to shape Melbourne's future. Is to help Melbourne grow. And remember, Melbourne will soon be the biggest city in Australia by population. So we are growing and we're going to add to our population as well. In fact, population is probably going to grow over 20% in the next 15 years. So growth is going to come, growth is going to happen. Whether we want it or like it or not, but it's going to grow. Now, I thought you might be interested a little bit in comparing Melbourne and Belfast. Belfast was founded in 665 AD. It's a fair few years ago. I don't think anybody was around then. 1170 years later, Melbourne was founded by John Batman on the banks of the Yarra, somewhere near Sorrento. And Belfast was founded by somebody whose name was never mentioned on the banks of the Lagan River. Now, the similarities between the Lagan and the Yarra are similar. They're both the same color. They're both that kind of color, and the city is developed around it. Population growth has been really, really interesting. You look at some of the numbers there. 1950, remember that's only 115 years after being formed. Melbourne had a population of 1.33 million. And it expanded really quickly because water and sewage and all that kind of stuff was established and started working. Belfast, on the other hand, had grown to 446,000. 1,285 years after it was formed, it had grown to 446,000. Why is that? I would argue no sun, it's cold, and it rained a lot. Wasn't the most desirable place in the world to go and set up home. You look at the expansion, therefore, of the population growth in 1970, 2.5 million, 1990, 3.9 million, and now we're at 5.1 million. So if you look at from 1950 to 2022, in 72 years, the population in Melbourne has grown by 3.82 million. That's 387% in 72 years. Belfast, on the other hand, didn't grow. It grew by 143% still. Now, again, why was that? Well, in the 70s, we were shooting and bombing each other. There wasn't much of a place to kind of hang out in Belfast. It gets dark during winter around 3:30 in the afternoon. It stays dark for a very long time. And in the summer, you can drive around without headlights at 10:30 and 11 o'clock at night because it's very bright. It's very far north, and you get a lot more daylight. But the Troubles was a big thing for Northern Ireland and for Belfast in particular. People didn't come, didn't set up shop, didn't set up business, didn't attract anybody to come and live there. And so population growth, whilst it happened, slowed. And it certainly wasn't through immigration. Melbourne will grow to over 6 million by 2037, which is that's a huge number of people. Now, where are they going to live? How are they going to live? Those are questions that we have to answer, and the government has to help with the answer, and we like to think that we're a part of that conversation as well. This is a picture of Belfast, a well-known picture in Northern Ireland, a picture during the early 70s. So that's the city centre, what was left of it at the time, where bombs have just gone off. They've been set off in department stores. So, from 69 to 98, for the best part of 30 years, there were bombs pretty much most days, but there were certainly shootings every day. There was no investment. And if you can imagine, the city centre of Belfast was fenced off and had a fence around it. So if you can imagine a metal fence from, let's say, Spencer Street to Spring Street, Flinders Street to Latrobe, and imagine that as a square around the CBD, effectively almost a huddle grid. Imagine that being fenced off with no cars, and every time you walk in through there, you were physically searched. Now, that's what Belfast was like when I grew up. And I grew up in a city centre where I was searched every day, twice a day to go to school. My school had sellotape on the windows, like wide sellotape, because if a bomb went off, then the glass wouldn't shatter in on you as you're sitting doing your maths lessons. So it's not that I didn't want an interruption to maths. I actually got quite nerdy when it comes to numbers and hence the banking bit, but it was different, it was a different place to grow up. Hopefully what you see now is Belfast today. Belfast today is a bustling, vibrant, historical city. It's got laneways just like Melbourne. Game of Thrones is there. There's a great sign in the middle of Belfast. Game of Thrones, lots of it was filmed in and around Northern Ireland and Belfast. There's a great sign in it that says Belfast untouched by dragons for 200 years, for those of you that are Game of Thrones fans. The Titanic Exhibition is there. So the Titanic, just as a reminder, was okay when it left Belfast. Somebody else got their hands on it and things went downhill after that, but it was okay when it left us. But the Titanic Exhibition was, for its time, on the anniversary of its, I think it's centurion anniversary. It was the world's most visited tourist location. Now, Belfast never had a world's most anything other than the hotel in the middle of Belfast called the Europa Hotel, which is the world's most bombed hotel in the world. So the Titanic being the exhibition was a terrific thing. The world's most visited tourist location, but still, the city's alive. It goes well. It feels good. People are growing up in that city now that have never known violence. They've never known the Troubles. They were born after the peace agreement. They were born in 2000. They're just leaving university, getting their first job. They don't know what it was like to grow up in that city, and long may that continue, frankly. I love Belfast. It's a great place. But it's still wet, it's still cold, and it's still got no sun. Now, how does that compare to this? Look, I love coming to the buildings like the Sofitel, and they're a great partner of ours, the Sofitel. They're a member of the committee, and they do a tremendous job for us and with us and help us a lot. But I love coming to this floor because you get the chance to look over the whole city. Whatever window you want to look out, you can't help but go, wow. It's like, this is just an amazing, amazing city. Look at it on the left and the black and white picture. No cars, but there were trams. Keep coming back to the trams. I love the trams. We love the trams in Melbourne. The trams are the biggest tram network in the world. It's the slowest tram network in the world. And it is. And they the Yarra Trams will say this, and they're frustrated by that. The average speed of the tram through our city is 9 kilometers an hour. Across the whole tram network, it's 16 kilometers an hour. It's the slowest in the world. It's largely the slowest in the CBD because of the free tram network, which the Committee for Melbourne advocated for. And that's because more people now jump on a tram and do a block rather than they used to walk it or they'd pay a fare for it. So trams are not too bothered about the loss of income. They're kind of like, it's slow, Mark. And because I was going to them to say, I think we should expand the free tram network, take us out to the G, take us to the Arts Centre. But they're going, it's not going to happen. It's just not. So don't be hanging your horses on a free tram network expansion. It's not going to happen. It's just too slow and they're working on it. Now look at the city on the right. That's how much it's developed. What an amazing city. Developing, and really importantly, it's recovering. Now, I've lived here during lockdowns as well as you have done, and horrendous though it was, the city is definitely recovering. Now, we advocate for Greater Melbourne, not just Melbourne CBD. The Lord Mayor does a terrific job of advocating for Melbourne CBD. There are lots of people that advocate for businesses and business forums. We recognise completely that the CBD is a critical part of Melbourne's growth. You have to have a world-class CBD if you're going to have a world-class city. But we spend a lot of our time talking and advocating for Greater Melbourne and the connectivity between Greater Melbourne and the city and the ins and outs that get involved in that. So we decided we wanted to kind of measure what Melbourne looked like against similar kind of cities across the world. Hopefully you can see that. It'll be interesting, quick little poll. The first thing people do when they look at a map go, oh, I've been there. So of the 20 cities, I reckon most of you, well, you'll all have been Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, obviously. But interesting to see how many cities you've been to out of that lot. And there are peer cities. They're not the biggest cities. They're not the most well-known. They're just peers according to the business of cities. So we're trying to compare like for like. I've actually been to 10 of them. And when I say 10 of those cities, it's because for work or for holidays I've been, as opposed to just flying through Abu Dhabi on my way to Ireland. In fact, that map just barely shows Ireland. So Belfast isn't the peer city of Melbourne at all. It doesn't have the population. It's not even a tenth of the size. And it's certainly, in population terms, it certainly is nowhere near the size when it comes to geographical spread. So we're not the most livable city. In fact, if you'd have seen in the news a couple of weeks ago, we're the 10th most livable city in the world. That's not too shabby. Bearing in mind what we've gone through, what we've done, and where we've been, being 10th is not too shabby. I wouldn't mind being a bit further up the list because I'm a competitive guy. I'm also very pleased that we're more livable than Sydney, but who needs a survey to tell you that? And we're definitely more livable than Brisbane. And again, who needs a survey to tell you that? And I've got friends and colleagues in both those cities, and they love that I'm passionate about Melbourne and I'm competitive with them for Melbourne. So that's interesting that we benchmark against those cities, but how do we perform against them? We took three, that's kind of hard slide to read, but we took three main kind of pillars down the right-hand side, the future economy, and then broke that down into three areas. Infrastructure and sustainability, broke that into three, livability and urban optimization, which are all very fancy kind of terms and words. And I'll talk a little bit about those in a second. But we are 7th when it comes to skills and talent, 7th out of those 20. That's not bad. Your top 10 is pretty good. And, but there's a skill shortage. Like there's labor shortage and there's a skill shortage. So what are we doing about improving our skills? How fast can we help people get more up to speed? How do we attract more people to come and live here with the right skills that business and industry needs in order to develop the city for the benefit of everybody in the city? We're 7th in that. Imagine if we were top 10 on everything. Right, let's look at what we do well before we get into all the other bits. We were recently voted, Melbourne was recently voted, no surprise to anybody in Melbourne, the world's #1 city if you're a sports fan. Melbourne. Now we all go, oh yeah, absolutely right. But it's the world, not just Australia. If you want to be a sports fan, Melbourne's the place to be. Manchester United put 76,000 people into the MCG last night. Now, I'm not a Manchester United fan, but 76,000 people turned up last night. You a Man United fan? No, good man. So 76,000 people at the G, to watch the round ball game, which is my game. I love the oval game as well. But 76,000. That just shows you how passionate we were. Remember, Manchester United played Victory on Friday night as well and put 26,000 in the ground. So the same team turned up 3 days later and put 76,000 in the G. We are a sports fanatical city. Long may that continue. Long may it continue. So we are the number one now. We've got arts, culture, sport, food, wine, world-class universities. So much going for our city, but we have work to do. Our global reach and our resilience. Resilience is about how do we cope with pandemics? What happens when the next one turns up? How does business keep going at the same time as we kind of live and operate and breathe and play? That's what resilience really means in this case. We're 14th when it comes to leading edge innovation. Right? So we're innovative, but there's more opportunity for us there. We're 10th in technology and innovation. We're 12th in the whole city connectivity. And we have I think it's the bottom, we've got our broadband speed, which my son could easily explain to you. As I said to him, son, that's a first world problem. And his answer was, Dad, I live in the first world. They're the only problems I have. But our broadband speed is the bottom third globally. We need to speed up, right? It needs to be faster. We need to connect more. We need to be able to walk through our city and look at our phone and go, well, okay, where's there a seat in a restaurant that I want to go to? And it's done. It knows you're walking through the city. We need to be better. And across the city, that connectivity needs to happen. We're not bad on environmental outcomes. We've got a real focus on the environment, particularly in the city. A real focus on it. Very high on solar usage, particularly in the city. Then you get to the stuff that we're brilliant at, our experience economy. People love coming to Melbourne. They really love it. Why wouldn't they? Look at this. Even on a chilly day, my daughter arrived back from Bali this morning, photographed the car sitting at the airport, had ice all over the front of it. Pretty chilly out at the airport. I walked out the front door in Hampton where I live and there was ice in the windscreen of the car. And thank God, I've never seen that in Melbourne. And I've been here since 2003. I left Ireland to get away from it. We used to boil a kettle of water and pour it over the front. You used to do that? Yeah, and then the windscreen would crack and you go, wonder how that happens, Amazing. So we have this real experience economy, which is amazing. We're pretty inclusive. We're very focused on well-being. We've got well-being centres at Fed Square and everything. So that's pretty good. And our image and our influence around livability, urban optimization, we do a lot of things really well. But remember, we've got a 20% increase in population coming in the next 15 years. We will be close to that. So 15 years now, 2037. It'll be 2032 before somebody sets their backside on a seat on a train from the airport to the city. 2032, 2033 before the first passengers are on that rail link. Now you kind of go, geez, how does it take so long? Like we've known for forever we need a train line to come from the airport. Now, plenty of people smarter than me have worked out that the best way to do that is via Sunshine, as opposed to like Perth right down the middle of the freeway. But that's done and that'll be organized, but that's a long way away, right? We are the 6th most unaffordable city in the world to buy a home. In the world. The 6th most unaffordable. I'm from banking, sell a lot of home loans. Companies make a lot of money out of debt and particularly around mortgages, but we're the 6th most unaffordable home. We only have 1,700 people for every square kilometre. Like you can't see the edge of Melbourne unless you hit the bay. You can't see it because we love to spread. We all want our block. If you go out into the western suburbs now where lots of the developments happen, people buy on a block and you think, oh, they'll be playing backyard cricket, bit of space down each side of the house, a front lawn. That's not happening. People are building to within a metre of their fence all around because they want a bigger house, less garden, no backyard cricket happening. We're so spread. And, if you add another 1 million people in, are we going to continue to spread or are we going to bring people closer? Are we going to have higher density? Density is a big issue for the city. 22% of people live within walking distance of public transport. 22%. That's not many, right? If you go to some of those other cities like Berlin, 51%. Tokyo is 40%. Milan is 38%. We're 22% of us. How many of you got the train in today? Just interestingly, got the train to the city? Fantastic. About 20%. I use it every day, and I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but 22% of people live within walking distance. Walking distance is 600 meters, by the way. It's not 700 or 800 meters, it's 600 meters. That's not far, right? So that's interesting. 6% of our freight goes by rail. If you'd have been in Melbourne earlier on today, up Collins Street, all the truck drivers are protesting, beeping their horns, making a lot of noise. They're complaining about diesel prices. And diesel is expensive. Diesel expensive largely because of Russia and war and all that kind of stuff. Are you up to give me the heave-ho? All right. Let me just whiz on. Anyway, but 27% of people come to work by public transport as well. So we have work to do. Let me just get to a couple of real issues for us. This thing on the left says that what people think they will get, that's the brand. Internationally and locally, people think they're going to get this. What they get when it comes to the product shows a negative line. So you go from 13 to 24. That's not a good thing for Melbourne. That means the brand is kind of perceived as being something that actually we don't deliver on. That's an issue for us when it comes to attract investment. The biggest issue is the box in the bottom right-hand corner. 34th when it comes to citizens. We don't think Melbourne lives up to its expectations. And we all live here, right? That's a really worrying thing. That's about Greater Melbourne and Melbourne CBD being more connected. And in our world where Laura and I spend our time, we advocate for that. Last slide, and I'm whizzing. So now we have a tale of two cities. Now, for those of you that are Charles Dickens fans, it's not a far, far better thing that I've done now than I've ever done. It is not the best of times or the worst of times. It's great times in Melbourne. But we're having a tale of two cities because our city is spread. It is diverging. The CBD is a world-class city centre and we need it. We're an underperforming metropolis. And by that, I mean Greater Melbourne is not enjoying the benefits of being in Melbourne. And the further out you go, the harder that becomes. Last very quick story on that. I live in Hampton. I can walk out of my home at Hampton, get the train, grab a beer at the G, and be sitting watching Collingwood, and I can do that in 34 minutes door to door. My daughter lives in Mordialloc and just recently moved out there. She's got a 22-minute walk to the train station. It's a 40-minute train ride, and she'll do that because she's 24 and her friends will do that. When she's 34 and 44 and she's got her family and she's got school tomorrow and the kids have got to get ready and, you know, and her and her husband are working, she's not going to come to the city and she could live anywhere. So how do we make her feel part of a Melbourne that is a bustling, world-class, most livable city in the world? That tale of two cities has got to get closer and not be as big an issue. So we have work to do, a lot of work to do. On Melbourne. I'm going to finish. Thank you very much for your time. And if you want to stay connected with us, you can tweet if you do. And we're also on LinkedIn at Committee for Melbourne. Please do just connect in with us, connect into the website. We'll send you our little newsletter every month, every fortnight, but every month it's going to be. Because every fortnight you're all getting a bit bored listening about Melbourne. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate your time and your interest in the city that we just love. It's just home for us, right? And we want to make it the best city in the world. Thank you again.
Don't go away. Stay where you are. Now we are running a little bit late, so I'll have the privilege of asking you to stay for a couple of minutes, and Sue's got a question for you.
All right, okay.
But
I might pass you on to the Lord Mayor for that comment, but no, I don't know. So the challenge is from Sue, who's an occasional driver to the city, through the city, and out through the city. Sue's not a big fan of the bicycle lanes. And I think Amsterdam as well, having, like you probably haven't been there a few times, the streets are very narrow. There isn't room for 2 car lanes. And I think Melbourne was, well, it certainly was designed differently. Look, there's a million and one different opinions, I think, on bicycle lanes. I think we need to have some. Do we need to have as many as we have? That's for the Lord Mayor to decide, I think. It's not my call because I'm committee for Melbourne as opposed to the city of Melbourne. So it's easy for me to throw Sally under the bus. I think the bike lanes are important for us. It shows we are more focused on being green. We are more sustainable in our use of energy and all of that. However, having them in the right place and how many of them we have and how frequent they are. I think even they will have admitted they went hard and went too hard during COVID. Hence, they've slowed down their development of they announced not long ago that slowed down the kind of development. They're probably 2 years ahead of where they wanted to, where they would have been had COVID not happened. And we worked with the City of Melbourne a fair bit, and chatting to them about that. That's kind of their view is they're farther on. They took the opportunity during COVID to really hit hard on bike lanes. So it's an interesting debate, right?
Well, thank you very much, Mark. Don't head off as yet. All right, let me take these glasses off. Would like to thank Mark for his illuminating history of Belfast and a little bit about Melbourne as well. We all see a wonderful prospect in our two organisations working together, and we will make that happen as well. So, as a gift, here you are. Now you'll be curious as to what that is. So, 2023 socks and centenary moments of Rotary book and a coin. Don't use the coin in any slots. The socks, limited edition convention socks, 200% Australian, made in Preston by past President Phil Endersby from Wilderness Wear. So thank you very much.
Thank you.